In a small coastal town named Harbor Glen, there lived a boy named Ethan Brooks. He loved maps, he loved postcards, he loved the sound of train wheels in old movies, he loved the idea of far places. He kept a notebook under his pillow. Inside it he wrote lists: deserts, mountains, neon cities, quiet islands. He drew little arrows and tiny stars. He planned routes like a captain, but his body did not follow his plans. A long sickness kept him weak. Some days he could only sit by the window. He watched seagulls turn in the wind, and he imagined he was turning with them. His room became his whole world. The bed was his island, the window was his harbor, the street was his only road. Still, his mind traveled. He traveled in thought, he traveled in stories, he traveled in dreams. His older brother, Miles Brooks, was the one who brought those dreams closer. Miles worked early mornings. He carried boxes at a market. He saved spare bills in a jar. He knew Ethan counted days by sunsets, not by calendars. Miles brought home little gifts: a snow globe from a tourist shop, a faded guidebook from a thrift shelf, a small compass that pointed north even when the room felt stuck. Ethan smiled, but the smile was thin, like light through fog. Miles saw it. Miles saw the frustration Ethan tried to hide, and Miles felt a quiet promise grow inside him. One night, rain tapped the roof, and the power flickered. Miles sat beside Ethan. And he spoke softly. He said, "One day we will see the world. For real, not just on paper." Ethan looked at him. Ethan wanted to believe, but belief was hard when your legs shook after a short walk. Ethan said, "I do not want pity, I want distance. I want streets I have never seen. I want air that smells different." Miles nodded. Miles said, "Then we will find a way." In the morning Miles opened the old guidebook, but he did not read about places. He read the small medical notes, scribbled in the back, the clinic numbers, the names, the margins Ethan had filled with hope and worry. Miles realized something simple: the world was not only far away, it was also hidden behind the right door, behind the right doctor, behind the right plan. And Miles decided he would knock on every door he had to, he would ask every question, he would learn every word he needed, and he would not stop until Ethan could stand at the edge of a real ocean, not only the one outside the window, but any ocean he chose. Miles began with the local clinic. He spoke with calm hands and a steady voice. He listened to the nurses, he wrote notes in a small pad, he learned new terms, he learned how tired people can sound when they say the same thing every day. He heard phrases like, "We are doing what we can," and "progress takes time." He did not argue, he thanked them. Then he asked for referrals, he asked for specialists, he asked for second opinions, he asked for a clear path. Some days he walked home with a small stack of papers, and his feet felt heavier than the stack. But he kept going. He visited libraries, he used old computers, he searched through lists, he found foundations, he found support groups, he found names of doctors who studied rare cases. He sent emails with simple words. He wrote, "My brother is a traveler in his heart. His body is holding him back. Please tell me if you can help." He waited, he refreshed inbox pages, he checked the mailbox. He kept the jar of savings in his closet, and he added to it whenever he could. Ethan watched all this from the couch. He tried to help too. He sorted papers, he organized folders, he made a binder, he labeled it Hope. He smiled at the title, then he looked away, because the title also hurt. One afternoon, Miles came home with his shoulders tense. He had met a specialist in the next city. The visit was polite, the advice was careful, the cost was high, the results were uncertain. Miles did not blame anyone. But he felt the walls closing in. He went to the porch and stared at the sea. The water looked endless, and yet it felt unreachable. Ethan rolled himself closer to the doorway. Ethan said, "You are doing too much, Miles, you need to live too." Miles turned. Miles said, "I am living. This is my road right now." Later that night Miles received a reply from a place he had never heard of, a research center in a mountain city. The email was from Dr. Harper Lane. She wrote in plain language. She said she had seen similar patterns before. She said there were newer approaches, not miracles, but real steps. She asked for records, she asked for tests, she asked for time. Miles felt his heart lift, not like fireworks, but like sunrise, slow, steady, warm. He showed the message to Ethan. Ethan read it twice, then he read it again. His hands trembled, but his eyes were bright. Ethan said, "Do you think this is real?" Miles said, "It is real enough to try." They spent days gathering documents, scanning pages, calling offices, waiting on hold. Miles learned patience in long lines and long silences. Ethan learned courage in small choices, like agreeing to one more test, like trusting one more stranger. The town around them kept moving. People went to work, kids rode bikes, seasons changed. But inside the Brooks house a new current started to flow, the current of maybe, the current of next, the current of forward. The trip to the mountain city took 6 hours by car. Miles borrowed a reliable sedan from a neighbor named Clara. Clara had kind eyes and a loud laugh. She said, "Bring it back with stories." Miles promised he would. Ethan sat in the passenger seat with a pillow behind his back. He watched the coastline fade into fields, then forests, then hills. Every mile felt like a small victory, because for the first time in a long time, he was moving towards something, not just waiting. They stopped at a roadside diner. The sign was bright. The coffee smelled strong. Ethan held the menu like it was a passport. He ordered pancakes, simple, warm. Miles watched him eat, and Miles felt hope sharpen into purpose. When they reached the research center, the building was quiet and clean. The air smelled like fresh paper and mint. Dr. Harper Lane greeted them in the lobby. She was calm. She wore glasses. She spoke like someone who respected time. She listened more than she talked. She asked Ethan about mornings, about stairs, about sleep, about dreams. She asked Miles about routines, about setbacks, about what had changed over the years. She did not make big promises. She did not use dramatic words. She said, "We will be honest, we will be thorough, we will try." Ethan liked that. Miles liked it too. The first day was tests. The second day was meetings. The third day was a plan. Dr. Lane explained it in clear steps: guided therapy, careful nutrition support, new medication options, gentle strength work, and regular monitoring. She said the goal was not perfection, the goal was function, the goal was freedom. She said, "Freedom is built in small pieces, not in one leap." Ethan nodded. He looked at Miles, and Miles nodded back. They stayed in a small motel near the center. The room had plain curtains and a humming air conditioner, but Ethan felt like it was a palace, because it meant they were on a path. At night they watched travel shows with the sound low. They pointed at places and laughed. They made a new list, not a fantasy list, a practical list. Easy trips first, then longer, then bold. Miles wrote, "One day, Tokyo." Ethan wrote, "One day, Patagonia." Then they both wrote, "One day, we will stand in the market and not rush. We will walk until we are tired in the normal way, not in the scary way." Dr. Lane introduced them to a therapist named Jordan Reed. Jordan was upbeat and patient. Jordan taught Ethan how to measure effort, how to rest without guilt, how to build strength without fear. The work was slow, and some days were frustrating. Ethan had days when he felt worse before he felt better. Miles learned to handle those days without panic. He learned to say, "This is part of the climb, not the end of the climb." Weeks passed, then months. They drove back and forth for appointments. They made phone calls. They kept charts on the fridge. And little by little, Ethan changed. He could stand longer. He could walk farther. He could breathe deeper. The window in his room stopped being a boundary. It became just a window again. Spring arrived in Harbor Glen with salty air and soft light. Ethan took his first long walk on the boardwalk. The wooden planks creaked under his shoes. The sea rolled like a slow drum. Miles walked beside him. Not holding him, just near, like a steady shadow. They passed the ice cream shop. They passed the kite stand. They passed tourists with cameras. Ethan felt ordinary in the best way. He stopped. He looked at Miles. He said, "I can do this." Miles said, "You are doing it." Ethan laughed. The laugh came easy, not forced, and it made Miles blink fast, because he did not want to cry in public. Later they visited Dr. Lane for a checkup. She reviewed the progress. She adjusted the plan. She said, "It is time to test real travel, not too far, not too intense, but real." She suggested a short trip by train, a controlled environment, smooth movement, and quick help if needed. Ethan and Miles chose a city 2 hours away, a place called Riverton. It had museums, parks, and a river walk. Ethan packed carefully. He packed water, snacks, a small med kit, extra socks, and his old notebook. Miles packed chargers, tickets, and a list of clinics just in case, not because he expected trouble, but because he trusted preparation. The morning of the trip, Ethan woke before sunrise. His hands shook as he tied his shoes. Miles brewed coffee. The kitchen smelled like a new beginning. At the station, the train looked huge, like a silver promise. Ethan stepped onto it slowly. Then he sat by the window. The doors closed, and the train began to move. Ethan watched homes blur into trees, and trees blur into open fields. He whispered, "We are really going." Miles smiled. Miles said, "We are really going." In Riverton they walked in a museum with tall ceilings. Ethan moved from painting to painting. He read signs. He listened to audio guides. He took breaks on benches. He did not rush. He did not push too hard. He simply lived in the moment. After the museum they ate lunch in a small cafe. The server was friendly. The soup was hot. The bread was fresh. And the room buzzed with quiet conversation. Ethan watched people and thought, "I am one of them." Not outside life, inside it. They walked along the river walk. Sunlight danced on water. Street musicians played soft tunes. Ethan dropped a few coins into a hat. The musician nodded. Ethan nodded back. The exchange felt simple and beautiful. In the evening they returned home by train. Ethan leaned his head back and closed his eyes. Miles thought he had fallen asleep. But Ethan spoke. He said, "I felt free today." Miles answered, "We will build on that." When they got home, Ethan opened his notebook. He drew a new star on the map. He labeled it Riverton. Then he wrote a line under it. "First of many." Miles looked over his shoulder. Miles said, "First of many." And this time it did not feel like a distant dream. It felt like a plan with legs. After Riverton, their world expanded like a sail catching wind. Dr. Lane approved longer trips, with careful pacing, with planned rest days, with clear check-ins. Ethan and Miles chose the next step, a flight to a warm desert city named Mesa Vista. Ethan had never been on a plane. At the airport he stared at the moving walkways, the loud announcements, the bright screens. Miles guided him through lines, through security, through gates. Ethan kept breathing slowly like Jordan had taught him. When they boarded, Ethan touched the seat and smiled. He said, "It feels like a spaceship." Miles laughed softly. The plane lifted. The ground dropped away. And Ethan felt a lightness that was more than physics. It was emotional. It was years of waiting releasing at once. In Mesa Vista the air was dry and clean. The sky was wide. The sunsets were orange and pink like a painting. They visited a botanical garden filled with cacti. They walked through shaded paths. They took breaks under pergolas. Ethan learned a new rhythm: walk, rest, hydrate, smile, repeat. At night, they sat outside their hotel and listened to distant music. Miles asked, "What do you want most from travel?" Ethan thought, then he said, "I want to feel new. I want to be surprised. I want to meet myself in different places." Miles nodded. He said, "Then we will choose places that change the way we look at the world." When they returned home, Ethan did not crash the way he used to. He was tired, but it was the satisfying kind of tired. Like finishing a good hike, not like losing a battle. The progress inspired them, but it also made Miles reflect. He had spent so long being the strong one, he had forgotten his own dreams. One night Ethan caught him staring at a photo of a distant skyline. Ethan said, "You wanted to travel too, before all this?" Miles hesitated, then he admitted, "Yes, I did. I just put it away." Ethan leaned forward. Ethan said, "Do not put it away anymore. We will do this together." Miles felt something loosen in his chest, like a knot finally releasing, so they planned. Not only for Ethan, but for both of them. They started a shared travel board on the wall, with pins and notes. They labeled categories: gentle trips, big trips, dream trips. They added budgets, timelines, and rest rules. Dr. Lane smiled when she saw it. She said, "This is what health can look like, not just numbers, but life choices." Jordan added small challenges: stairs with breaks, longer walks with a day off after, strengthening with fun goals, like carrying a backpack for 10 minutes, then 20. Ethan improved, and Miles improved too, not physically, but emotionally. He learned to relax without guilt. He learned to trust the plan. He learned that being a good brother did not mean being exhausted all the time. It meant being present. And now, as summer approached, they picked a destination that made both of them grin. A city known for music and lakes. A place called Northbridge. It was farther, it was busier, and it was real, and they were ready. Northbridge welcomed them with street festivals and cool evening air. The city had brick buildings, green parks, and a lake that reflected clouds like a mirror. Ethan wore comfortable shoes and carried a light backpack. Miles carried the heavier bag, not because Ethan could not, but because Miles liked the feeling of helping in small ways now, not in desperate ways. In Northbridge they rented bicycles, slow ones with wide seats. They rode along a lakeside trail. They stopped for lemonade. Ethan laughed when his hair blew into his eyes. He said, "I look like a confused rock star." Miles said, "You look like a traveler." They visited a jazz club early in the evening. It was family friendly. The music was warm and smooth. Ethan tapped his fingers on the table. His eyes shone under soft lights. After the show they walked back to the hotel, and Ethan realized something surprising. He was not thinking about his body every minute. He was thinking about the city, the people, the sounds, the smell of street food, the feeling of being somewhere else. And that was the biggest victory, because it meant the sickness was no longer the main character in his story. It was just a background challenge, manageable, predictable, not the boss of his life. The next day they took a boat tour. The guide spoke about history, about bridges, about old legends. Ethan listened closely. He loved details. He loved how every place had layers. Later they sat on a bench with a view of the water. Miles asked, "What do you want to do when we get back?" Ethan said, "I want to help someone else who feels stuck." Miles raised his eyebrows. Ethan continued, "I know how lonely it is. I want to make a channel. Or a small community, something that says, you are not broken. You are building." Miles smiled. Miles said, "We can do that." On their last evening in Northbridge they met a local photographer named Ava Collins. She was taking pictures of the sunset. She offered to take a photo of them together. Miles almost refused, but Ethan said yes. They stood side by side, the lake behind them, the sky wide, their posture relaxed. Ava showed them the picture, and Ethan barely recognized himself. He looked steady. He looked alive. He looked like someone who belonged in the world, not someone watching it from a window. Ethan saved the photo. Miles saved it too. Back home they printed it and placed it on the travel board, under a new title, Proof. They kept training, they kept checkups, they kept routines, and they kept dreaming bigger. One evening Dr. Lane called with an update. She said Ethan was stable enough for international travel, with precautions, with smart pacing, and with the same respect for rest. Miles put the phone on speaker. Ethan heard the words and held his breath. Dr. Lane said, "You have earned this step." Ethan whispered, "Thank you." Then he looked at Miles, and Miles already knew the first place, because Ethan had been whispering it for years. He said, "We are going to Paris." They prepared for Paris like it was a mission and a celebration at the same time. They checked accessibility, they planned routes with rest points, they booked a hotel near a calm neighborhood, they printed documents. They packed familiar snacks, they carried letters from Dr. Lane, just in case. Ethan practiced longer walks weeks before. Miles practiced patience with the new complexity. When the day arrived, the airport felt less scary than before, because now they had experience. The flight was long, but they moved gently, they stretched, they sipped water, they rested. When they landed, Paris greeted them with a cool breeze and soft morning light. Ethan stepped outside and smelled bakery air. Butter and sugar and coffee. He smiled without trying. They walked along a quiet street. They saw balconies with plants. They heard a language that flowed like music. Ethan felt new in the exact way he had described, surprised, awake, curious. They visited a riverside path. They watched boats slide by. They sat on steps and ate warm pastries. Miles said, "Look at you, Ethan, you are here." Ethan answered, "We are here." They visited a museum on a weekday morning. They moved slowly through halls. Ethan paused often. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He wanted to look longer, to notice brush strokes, to feel time stretching. Later they walked to a garden, and Ethan sat under a tree. The leaves whispered, children laughed, someone played a small accordion nearby. It was peaceful, it was real, and for a moment Ethan felt a wave of emotion so big he almost could not hold it. He did not want to cry in public again, but he did not fight it. He let his eyes water. He let the feeling pass like the river. Miles sat beside him. Miles did not say much. He just stayed, because sometimes support is silence. In the evening they stood near a famous tower. Lights blinked softly. People took pictures. Ethan watched the scene and felt something shift inside him. He realized travel was not about collecting places. It was about reclaiming time. Time he thought he had lost. Time he thought was closed off forever. Miles asked, "What is the next dream?" Ethan said, "I want to see the world from many angles. I want to learn how people live. I want to bring those stories home, so other people can travel with us, even if they cannot yet." Miles said, "Then we will tell stories." When they returned to the hotel, Ethan opened his notebook and wrote in big letters, "Paris." Then below he wrote, "I walked by the river, I tasted the morning, I listened to strangers and felt connected." He paused, then he added, "My brother did not save me, he walked with me, and somehow that mattered even more. Because it made Ethan feel strong, not carried." The next day they took a short train ride to a nearby town with cobblestone streets. Ethan walked across a small bridge, and he whispered, "This is the kind of distance I wanted, not just miles, but meaning." Miles answered, "And we will keep finding it." From Paris they did not rush to the next country. They practiced a new rule: stay long enough to breathe. They spent extra days doing simple things, buying fruit at a market, sitting at cafes, walking one calm block at a time. Ethan learned that travel could be gentle, it did not have to be a race. On their flight home they talked about what came next. Miles said, "We can keep going abroad, but we can also build something steady at home." Ethan nodded. He said, "I want both. I want roots and wings." So when they returned to Harbor Glen they started a small project. They created a channel called Two Brothers, One Map. The content was simple and friendly. Ethan narrated short moments. The smell of a bakery, the sound of a lake, the feeling of a museum bench. After a long walk, Miles shared planning tips, pacing ideas, and budget notes. They kept it positive, they kept it safe, they avoided heavy topics, they focused on hope and practical kindness. People began to watch, then comment, then share their own stories. Some viewers were dealing with limitations too: injuries, chronic fatigue, anxiety, or just a hard season of life. Ethan answered with gentle words. He said, "You are allowed to start small. A new park counts, a new street counts, a new day counts." Jordan helped them create a simple mobility-friendly checklist. Dr. Lane agreed to do a short interview about planning and pacing. She kept it general. She spoke about listening to your body and working with professionals. She emphasized safe steps. Viewers appreciated her calm tone, and the community grew. One day a message arrived from a teenager named Noah. He wrote that he felt stuck at home. He wrote that Ethan made him believe he could do more, even if more was just walking to the corner store. Ethan showed the message to Miles. Ethan's eyes filled again. Miles said, "You wanted to help, you are helping." That summer they planned another international trip, this time to Japan, not because it was trendy, but because Ethan had always loved the mix of tradition and modern life. They planned carefully. They chose neighborhoods with easy transit. They booked quiet hotels. They learned basic phrases. They mapped out rest cafes. And they built in days with no major goals, just wandering slowly. In Tokyo, Ethan stood under bright signs he heard crossing signals. He watched people move like a river of purpose. He smiled at a vending machine that sold warm drinks. He laughed at the tiny, perfect convenience store meals. They visited a garden in the city, and Ethan felt the same peace he had felt under the tree in Paris. Because peace travels too. In Kyoto they walked through calm streets. They visited a temple area respectfully. They listened to wind in bamboo. Ethan whispered, "The world is full of quiet wonders," Miles said, "and you are finally meeting them." They filmed short clips, not flashy, not rushed, just honest, and when they returned home they edited and posted. The comments were full of gratitude, and Ethan began to understand that his story was bigger than travel now. It was about returning to life, returning to possibility. As the years went on, Ethan's routine became stable: therapy, movement, rest, good food, checkups, and joy. He still had hard days, but hard days no longer scared him the way they used to. Because he had tools, he had support, and he had proof that a hard day did not erase a good life. Miles also changed. He no longer measured his worth by how much he sacrificed, he measured it by how well he showed up, with kindness, with humor, with steadiness. Together they built a small non-profit project connected to their channel. It was called Map Lights. It offered travel grants for gentle trips, even short ones. For people who needed a boost. It also offered planning help, and it partnered with local clinics for general guidance. Again, they kept everything safe, practical, and respectful. They never promised miracles, they promised support. One fall they hosted a small meet-up in Harbor Glen. Families came, older couples came, solo travelers came, people shared stories over coffee. Ethan spoke on a small stage. His voice was calm. He said, "I used to think my life was behind glass. I used to look out at the world like it was for other people. Then my brother decided the glass was not a wall, it was a challenge, and we worked on it together, piece by piece." He looked at Miles and smiled. Miles waved awkwardly. The crowd laughed warmly. After the meet-up, Dr. Lane visited Harbor Glen. She had been invited as a guest. She walked with them on the boardwalk. She watched the sea. She said, "You two turned a medical plan into a life plan. And that is rare." Ethan thanked her. Miles thanked her. And they all ate fish tacos at a casual place near the pier. Simple, normal, perfect. Later that night, Ethan and Miles sat in their living room with the travel board. It was crowded now, pins everywhere. Photos everywhere, notes everywhere. Ethan said, "Do you remember the day I said I want distance?" Miles said, "I remember." Ethan said, "I thought distance was only miles. But it is also courage, it is also time, it is also choosing to try again after a setback." Miles nodded. He said, "And I thought being a good brother meant fixing everything. But it also means trusting you to grow." Ethan smiled. He said, "We grew together." They planned one more dream trip, a long one, around the world route. Not fast, not flashy, but thoughtful. Paris again for old memories, then a quiet island in Greece, then a train through Switzerland, then a coastal drive in California, then a short hike in a redwood forest, then a market in Mexico City, then a calm beach in Hawaii, then home. They gave themselves months, not weeks. They built pauses into the route. They treated rest as part of the journey, not as a failure. The day they finally began that big trip, Clara, the neighbor who once lent the car, came to see them off. She hugged them both. She said, "Bring it back with stories." Miles laughed. He said, "We always do." Ethan held his notebook. The pages were thick now, full of stamps, tickets, and small scribbles. He looked at the horizon, and he felt something simple, gratitude, not loud, not dramatic, just steady, like a compass pointing true. The round-the-world journey was everything they hoped and nothing they could fully predict, because the best moments were small. In Paris they returned to the river at sunrise. The city was quiet. Ethan sat on the same kind of steps, and he realized he was not the same person who sat there before. He was calmer, he was stronger, he was more patient with himself. In Greece they stayed on a peaceful island. They watched fishermen mend nets. They ate fresh olives. They listened to waves at night. Miles said, "This place feels like a deep breath." Ethan said, "That is what I wanted." In Switzerland they took a train that curved between mountains. Ethan watched peaks slide past the window. He whispered, "I used to think mountains were only on posters. Now they are real." Miles said, "And so are you." In California they walked under redwoods. The trees were tall and quiet. The air smelled like earth and rain. Ethan put a hand on the bark and smiled. He said, "I feel small in a good way." Miles said, "The world is big, but you are in it." In Mexico City they visited a market full of colors, fruit stacked like art, music in the air, vendors calling out kindly. Ethan tried a sweet drink. He laughed at the new flavor. He said, "My brain is dancing." Miles said, "Your brain has good taste." In Hawaii they sat on sand and watched the ocean, and Ethan thought about the first ocean he watched from his window. The same kind of water, but a different life. He turned to Miles. He said, "I want to mark something in the notebook." Miles said, "What?" Ethan said, "I want to write the ending." Miles raised an eyebrow. Ethan smiled. He said, "Not the ending of travel. The ending of the old story, the one where I was stuck." Miles nodded. Ethan opened the notebook and wrote slowly. He wrote, "Once there was a boy who loved travel, and he thought his body had locked the door. Then his brother found the right help, and the door opened, not all at once, but enough, and they walked through together." He paused, then he added, "And they did not chase the world to prove anything, they met the world to feel alive, and when they came home, they brought others with them through stories, through kindness, through small grants, through encouragement, through simple maps." He closed the notebook, and he looked at Miles. He said, "You gave me my life back." Miles shook his head. He said, "We built it back." Ethan nodded. He said, "Yes, we built it, together." On their final day, they stood at a lookout above the sea. The sun was low, the wind was gentle. Miles took out his phone to film. Ethan stopped him. Ethan said, "Not this time, let it be just ours." Miles put the phone away, they watched the horizon, and in that quiet moment, the good ending was not a big speech, it was a feeling, two brothers, side by side, no rush, no fear, only the steady knowledge that tomorrow was open, and that the world, wide and bright, was no longer a distant picture, it was a home they could visit, again and again, one careful step at a time.